When my son called me over to his house last Sunday, I thought it was some kind of emergency. His wife is 35 weeks pregnant, and my wife and I have been sitting by the phone waiting for the news that they were rushing to the hospital. Maybe it's a slight exaggeration, but you get my drift, right? We were excited to become grandparents, so I didn't even expect him to surprise me with an early birthday gift. What's this? I asked as he passed me the small envelope. My birthday wasn't for another week or so, to be honest. I was thinking that it had to be a simple gift card or maybe just cash. I wasn't expecting anything major. Instead, when I opened up the birthday message, I found 2 tickets to a local airfield inside. I was both shocked and confused. No, serious, Trevor. What is this? I said with a nervous laugh. You've always been talking about having a little adventure, living on the edge, Dad, and, well, you aren't getting any younger, he said, slipping his hand into his pocket. His wife nudged him a little and remarked, What he means is that he hoped that you could do this together before the baby comes. I have to admit, I was speechless. He was right, though. As he grew up, I've always been a bit wistful about the things that I've missed out on. I've never been upset about raising a family or anything like that. I mean, of course, I've made sure to let my children know that, but I guess he must have caught on to the subtle hints that I was giving for the past year that I wanted to do something extraordinary. In my dreams, it had always been mountain climbing, snowboarding, something like that. What he was offering was definitely unexpected. So we'll head out to the airfield around dawn, just as the clouds are breaking. I got in touch with Pete from college. He's got a pilot license, and he can take us up as high as we want for the jump, Trevor said with a broad smile. It sounded frightening. I mean, I've never even been in a plane, and now my son was telling me he wanted me to jump from one. But I didn't want to be rude, so I hugged him, and I said thanks. And over the next week, I'll admit I did my best to come up with an excuse to why I couldn't go. But I Googled it online, and I realized not only were these tickets expensive, they weren't refundable. It's perfectly safe. People do it all the time, my wife told me when I explained my concern to her. I'm sure Trevor won't just have you going solo. You'll be fine, she added. I tried to push aside my doubts and worries to have a good time, and convincing myself this was just a once-in-a-lifetime chance to really live a little, you know? I kept checking the weather, too, thinking maybe divine intervention would prevent me from going. One time, Trevor caught me doing it and reassured me, Don't worry, Dad. Pete said, even if there's a little storm, he can fly us up. It'll be fine. I smiled nervously. He had no idea how scared I was. The night before the skydive, I was in the bathroom, either vomiting or, well, having my dinner come out the other end. And anyway, it was nerves and stress getting the better of me. My damn mind wouldn't calm down about something that was supposed to be fun. Finally, I just had to psych myself up to overcome that initial fear, and then took a few pills for anxiety just in case. He picked me up that morning around 6 a.m., right before the sun was rising. I finished getting dressed and checking the sky, noting a few dark clouds to the west. No need to worry, Dad, that's headed the other way, out of the area, he said as we climbed into his Jeep Cherokee. The airfield was only about a 20-minute drive from my house, and the whole way I had to give myself another motivational talk in my head. Dad, you look like you've seen a ghost, Trevor teased. Sorry, would you believe your old man is actually scared to death about this? I said with a half smile. He gave me the stink eye. For the past few years, you've been constantly talking about doing something like this. I mean, don't get cold feet now, he told me. I nodded. I apologized as our instructor showed up, waving excitedly at both of us. Howdy, Trevor. Bruce. Glad you both could make it. Perfect day for diving, I do say so myself, he said, walking straight over to the open hangar bay. There weren't many planes available, but it was easy to guess the large cargo vessel was going to be our means to get up into the clouds, since it had wide doors on the side. I'm gonna do a pre-flight check. You two just sit right, Pete told us with a wink. I swallowed a gulp of air. Trevor tapped his foot impatiently. Somewhere off in the distance, I heard the rumble of thunder, and I reached to check my phone. Oh yeah, I guess I should have mentioned this. No electronic devices should be used during the flight or the jump. People usually drop them by accident, and then it's bye-bye smartphone, so just drop them over here before we take off, Pete said, pointing to the nearby basket. Trevor complied immediately, and I checked the weather again, just to be sure the storm really was moving away. Then again, I thought to myself, I doubted Pete would even come out here if he thought that it was a safety risk. Looks like we're good to go, Pete asked as he climbed on board and started up the instruments for the control panel. The propeller started to spin, and Pete explained what was going to happen. Once I get this engine rev, we're going to be going about 13,000 feet in the next 19 minutes. In the meantime, I'm going to go over a bit of basic parachute safety, he shouted over the roar of the engine. Trevor and I both did our best to listen as he piloted us higher and higher. The altitude and the velocity that we were traveling was enough to make my stomach do some tricks. It was making it difficult to focus on what he was telling us. Then, as we broke the first layer of clouds, Pete got silent as he looked towards the open sky. Something wrong? I asked. He had just been explaining how to put on the safety vest when he got dead quiet and remarked, This is kind of weird. Looks like we got a storm cell in the area. I'll try to fly us a little south. I looked out the window next to my seat and got a good look at the patch of clouds that had him concerned, realizing I had never seen a storm from this angle. Above the clouds, watching moisture gently rise and swirl and form a cluster was both beautiful and astonishing. I'm not an expert on this, but it did seem to move a lot faster than I thought a normal pitch of clouds would. Is that storm following us? I asked hesitantly. Saying it out loud sounded bizarre. I was being irrational, I told myself, but neither Trevor or Pete said a word as we flew towards the lower atmosphere to prepare for the jump. We need to dive a little early just to be safe, Pete told us as he repeated some of the instructions for the parachute. Then we heard a loud crack of thunder and the plane itself shook. Maybe we should just turn back, my son remarked. I felt like I was going to throw up after that last tumble in the air, but I told myself I could make it. Let's do this. I'll be okay, I reassured him. Pete got us to a steady altitude and checked the cloud cover. For the moment, everything seemed clear. This is as good a spot as any, he told us. Then we saw that some dark storm cell pushed through the cloud cover, swirling like a hive of bees towards us, and I felt my heart drop. It seemed like the cloud was observing us the way a stalking predator would. Then, before I could even ask my son what he thought, a long streak of lightning ripped across the sky and smashed into the cockpit of the plane. Holy shit! Pete said, grabbing a hold of the controls to keep us level. What was that? I asked. Pete jerked the controls of the small aircraft up, forcing me to grab a hold of my seat as I felt my lunch go to the bottom of my stomach. Then we whirled back around and went northwest, shouting, We got something on our tail. I don't know what, but it's nasty. Trevor and I looked towards the way that we had come, both of us speechless with panic as we saw the strange large mass of clouds push towards us. The predator was on the hunt. Do you have a parachute ready? Pete shouted. Another bolt of lightning struck the right wing, smashing apart a third of the plating as we struggled to stay airborne. You need to jump! Now! Pete instructed. I looked at Trevor for confirmation as more of the strange energy rocketed towards our tiny craft and the plane started to experience power failure. Come on, Dad! He shouted as he opened the cargo doors and stared down at the seemingly infinite gap between us and the ground. Dive! Go! Pete insisted as the black storm cloud was about to swarm us all. Trevor leapt first, his body immediately getting caught in the winds of the cloud and falling away from the plane to the east. I held on to the side of the plane, my pulse racing as I looked to Pete. He opened his mouth to give me another command, but never got the chance. Another large bolt of lightning pierced the cockpit and ripped him from his seat. His screams echoed across the expanse for miles as I put one foot on the edge towards the jump. It was now or never. I closed my eyes and plummeted. Immediately, it felt like all the oxygen had left my lungs as I fell and tumbled end over end from the plane. In one flash of my view, I saw the black cloud swarm our ship, tearing it apart the way termites would. It couldn't possibly be another storm cell, I thought to myself. This was a breathing organism, commanding the elements to consume us as food. Then I was hurtling towards the ground, my entire life flashing before my eyes as I searched the wide sky for any sign of Trevor. I saw him, arms outstretched about 5 yards away, using the specialized suit he was wearing to ride the air down and encouraging me to do the same. I was trying not to think of what had just happened to Pete, to focus on everything that we would need to do to make it to the ground and survive. "Don't pull the chute until I tell you when," Trevor shouted above the roar of the wind. My brain was still trying to catch up with the decision to even make the jump from the plane when I heard a loud explosion above, and Trevor said, "Don't look up!" The wind was hitting me as my body got closer and closer to the point of no return. Then the drowning noise from the rushing air was overwhelming by the sound of the storm. "Now, Dad, do it now!" My son shouted as he reached for his pull string and got ready to launch for the parachute. Then the swarm of dark clouds was already on top of him. As he hit the pull cord, his body shot upwards. I looked up, watching as Trevor disappeared from my sight and holding on to the hope that he was fine. And then the screams came. I couldn't even imagine what was happening to my son as I heard his bones break and his cries for help get louder and louder. I knew if I pulled the cord now, I would be caught in the maw of the bizarre creature too, so I hesitated for one more moment before I yanked on the release. It felt like I was flying for a moment. The sudden exhilaration of moving downwards stopped by the chute opening as I drifted and swayed towards the south. I caught a glimpse of the strange black cloud that had devoured Pete and my son, and I saw it was about to start following me. I panicked. I tugged my body towards the tree line, hoping to hide in the canopy and let the monster get tired of searching for me. My parachute snagged the tops of the trees, and I was thrown about like a puppet dangling from a string. Above me, I watched the dark cloud of life fly over top of the trees, perhaps trying to find its next meal, and then it disappeared up through the cloud cover, out of sight. I don't know, I'm not really sure how long I was stranded there. Felt like days. I was too terrified to move, too numb with pain from the shocking fall to consider climbing out. With no cell phone to call for help, I was stuck there for the next few hours until some local campers caught sight of me dangling and helped me down. They offered me warm food and something to drink as I asked for a phone to call my wife. It didn't really hit me that Trevor was gone until I had to tell her. Tears burst out of my eyes as I passed the phone back. I just couldn't stop sobbing from the ordeal I had gone through. The campers took me to a nearby emergency center to get checked for injuries, and authorities promised that they would find Trevor's body wherever it fell. I didn't bother telling them they won't find it. I knew the sound I heard, like a python crushing its food. My son was gone. Something in the sky had killed him. It's been about a week now since it happened, and my family's still recovering from the loss. None of them know what really happened. All they think I'm experiencing now is just stress, trauma from the event, which is probably partially true. But I can't look up at the sky and feel safe anymore. I can't hold back the truth much longer, even though I know they'll call me insane, but they need to know. Everyone does. Something unholy and evil is up there in the clouds, waiting to kill us all. Hey there kids, it's me, MrCreepyPasta, and I wanted to tell you thank you so much for watching tonight's video or listening to tonight's episode of the podcast. If you guys are confused about what I'm talking about every time I say tonight's video or tonight's episode of the podcast, you can always find out more about that at youtube.com/MrCreepyPasta, where you can subscribe and get the latest video. Or if you're listening to the videos, then you can find it on Spotify under MrCreepyPasta Storytime, and you can listen to this as a podcast, if you want to save yourself your data. Or if you're listening on the podcast and you're like, man, what episode is this? I don't know how to find more of this or what came before it. Check out the YouTube. There's full playlists of all the series, and they go years back, which I can't do on the podcast, unfortunately. And like always, I want to give a big thank you to all of my supporters on Patreon. You guys, as always, are the real MVPs. And I really appreciate it. If you guys want to join them, you can head over to patreon.com/MrCreepyPasta and see all these cool, fine folk. that I'm about to mispronounce the names of here or in the description down below. People such as Jacob Schaefer, Zach, Jordan Alexander Sanchez, Brian Ars, Ken Lando Higuchi, Bobby Karman, Tristan Pelton, Chase Burnett, Diana Kraus, Melancholy Corpse, Hollow Zero, Ferb, Harley, Tainted Raven, Katie Birch, Sashi Suzaku, Katrina Beisel, Kayden the Spooky Boy, Zane Nightshade, MyBodySoundsLikeRiceKrispys, AshWood, Lord of the Weebs, Jay, Miss Xandra, MrUnsettlingSpaghetti, Eurogore, Tsuji Campbell, Marco Takes Dabs 420, Stricken, Azurine Fox, Robert White, Andre Garcia, Snails Brennard, Legit Quad Feed, Fried Chicken 12, James Bruce, Chris Levins, Freddy Krueger, Tynanny, 1-800-Nightmare, Unknown Nobody, Michael Scarborough, Infernal One, James Lowe, Lisa Cottrell, Jimbo the Hutt, Caspian, Jordan Els, Hades' Nephew, Tater Chip, Acid System, Prozac and Pancake Appreciation Society, Cryptic Nightmares, Brennan Wright, Someone You Love, Kiri the Sloth, Tommy Green, Liam Newman, Sky Harbor, Caleb Dougal, Nina Smith, Nico Kaio, Rafael Rodriguez, The Ginger Bros, Aaron Stormcrow, Daniel Polson, Trace Miles, and Corey Kenshin. Thank you guys, as always, for supporting the channel. You're all wonderful. I love every single one of you guys, for real. You guys help me out so much, as well as everybody down there in the description below, as well as everybody else who watches and subs and does everything else with this channel. Thank you guys so much. And as always, sweet dreams.